Have you ever heard of mortality awareness? Well, I had not until recently, actually. I was reading a book called The Antidote by Oliver Berkman, and he was talking about this concept of a mortality awareness, right? This awareness of the fact that we are gonna die, right? And this is weird. Nobody wants to think about death. I don't want to think about death. You don't want to think about death. It's not a fun, pleasant subject. It's really hard to talk about. It's hard to think about. Like we're living life now, right here, right? We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to think about it. But the reality is that we are all going to die. You're going to die. I'm going to die. I mean, hopefully it's a long, 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 long time from now. But the fact is, that is going to happen. And the point of mortality awareness, especially when it comes to our time, is that if we are present with that awareness, if we are understanding of and actually seeking out frequently the awareness of our own mortality, then what this does is it allows us to actually make better choices about how we're spending our time right now, right? If we think that time is endless and like we can do all of the things, then we're not making trade-offs. And in fact, this is why time management is important, right? We don't have unlimited time. We can't do all of the things, and therefore we have to choose which things we are going to do, which things matter to us. However, a lot of us are operating without really thinking about it, just kind of as if we do have endless time, right? We're not really thinking about the fact that we don't have endless time. We're not thinking about our own mortality. And as a result of that, we're not actually being that intentional about the choices that we're making. And maybe we're not feeling so great about the things that we're doing, but we're thinking, whatever, this is just a phase in life and I'll have time. But the reality is, like, we are not all guaranteed that. And in fact, I had my own brush with mortality, right? Um, Several months or actually no, a couple of years ago, right? I had my own brush when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And honestly, before that, it's not something that was on my mind a lot. I was like literally not thinking about death. I thought, I mean, yeah, of course I'll eventually die, but like when I'm in my 90s or maybe even longer as medical health gets better, right? But that even though I probably wasn't going to die, I mean, we didn't know, but it was caught early, so I probably wasn't going to die. But it was something that I was like, oh no, right? Like I just have to face this in a way I never had to before. That actually really changed how I use my time. Now, I like to think that I was pretty aware and intentional before that about how I used my time. But the reality is, like, sometimes I was just really focused on just getting my list done and doing the things that I needed to do. And there were two really big changes for me after I had cancer. And right now I'm cancer free, but I do have to take meds every single day that essentially help prevent a recurrence of cancer, right? And so every single day, every morning when I take my meds, I have to face my own mortality, right? I have to take something that says like, we hope that basically is like, we hope this will prevent you from getting something that will kill you again, right? So I have to think about that every day. And at first I thought, oh, I don't want to think about this every day. But actually, it's been a real boon because it has changed two things really significantly. About how I live my life and how I think about things, how the trade-offs that I make with time. So, what are those things? So, one of them is that about a little over a year ago, I started pottery. Started going to ceramic studio, and this has become something that is really central to my life. It's actually something I wanted to do for a really long time, but I didn't because you know what? I have kids, I have a job, I have business, I have a family, I have to cook dinner every day. I was like, that's a hobby that's going to take too much time. It's going to be a hobby that's away from my house. It's a hobby that takes me away from my family, and I just was kind of feeling like, oh, it's a little too selfish of me to do that. But actually, after I was diagnosed with cancer and came through it, I said, no, you know what? This is something I've wanted to do for a long time. I am going to dive into it and just see what happens. And it turns out it's been like a huge joy, a huge source of joy for me over the last couple of years. And in fact, or really the last like year and a little bit, and I've made friends at the Pottery Studio. I really get excited about going there. I learn so much. Like it's just been such a wonderful thing that's happened in my life that I wouldn't have done, I don't think. Maybe until I was retired, if I hadn't have had to face my mortality. Right. And then there's another thing that changed, and this is really how I think about my to-do list and my plan for the day and how that intersects with kind of connection with other people. Right. So in the before times, when I was not regularly thinking about my own mortality, if, I would kind of prioritize my plan instead of everything else, right? And so, if my husband was home from work for the day, he was working from home and he would say, "Hey, do you want to go to lunch?" And I hadn't planned to take an hour or two to go to lunch. I'd planned to do other things. I would usually just stick to my plan, right? And say, "No, no, no, I can't do it this time." Now I just say yes, right? Like I prioritize that connection. I can move things around, right? You know what? If I get something done a day later, a couple days later, it's probably not going to make a big difference. But spending that time with people that I love, that's important to me. And that's something that I don't want to take for granted. And the other thing is, on that same note, when I receive a phone call, like my phone is always on silent, so I'm not really very often like getting a call that I can hear the ring of. But sometimes I'll look down and somebody is actually calling me at that time. And in the before times, what I used to do is just let it go to voicemail, and I was like, no, I'm working, and I will call that person back later. And now, if it's like my sister or a friend or somebody, somebody that matters to me in my life, I will just answer the call. I may not talk forever, but I just prioritize that connection. And like these are two big things that have changed for me in the year plus that I have been having to face my mortality on a daily basis. Now, I hope that you do not have to face anything like I have faced, but there are still ways that you can start thinking about your own mortality in a way that is really positive towards how you spend your time. And I'm going to give you a couple of questions that you can ask yourself if you would like to start thinking about this so that you can make better decisions about how you spend your time, feel better about what works. And one of these ways that Oliver Berkman suggests in this book, the antidote, is simply to ask yourself a few questions. And so I want to give you some questions that you can ask. And I'm going to ask you the questions that he says, but I'm also going to give you an extra one just from me to you. So the first question is just if you were looking back on your life, if your future self is looking at how you're spending your time right now, what are the things that they would say like, you should be spending a little bit less time on that, right? Like this doesn't make sense, right? And then if your future self were to be looking back on you and how you're spending time right now, what would they say you should be spending more time on, right? What would they say like, I don't know, I don't get it. Like, why aren't you spending more time on that right now? And then the question that I'm going to ask you is the answers to those questions, whatever they are, what is one tiny step that you can take today to help move you towards that better use of your time that will feel better, that your future you will congratulate you for, so that you won't have to be looking back at a life of regrets about how you spent your time, wishing that you had, spent more time on some things and less time on others, etc. So those are those three questions that I want you to ask yourself. Um, as if you were looking back on your future self is telling you right now, what is it that you would want to be doing more of? What are you spending too much time on? And then what are you not spending time on enough? And then what's one tiny thing that you could do today? Now, if you like this content, if you want to keep seeing me in your feed, please give it a like and a subscribe so that I know, and then I know what to continue to put into this channel. And if you have ideas, comment below. If you want me to do a video about something specific, I would love to. So go ahead, comment below and let me know. Otherwise, until next week.
Wow. Maybe I should spend less time on my hobbies and start doing something good, like editing this video. But while we're here, only 22% of you guys are actually subscribed, and it'd be a big help if you guys were to.